What would happen if I told you that Hamilton's car was modified without his knowledge, sabotaging his career in Zandvoort? Who is really in command in Ferrari, and why could this be an internal breakdown point? Stay, because what Vasseur discovered could change everything. Lewis Hamilton arrived at the Netherlands Grand Prix at a crucial moment of his adaptation with Ferrari. After 2 intense weekends in Australia and China, the British had managed to find a solid, trusted base with the SF25. Friday's training were especially productive. Hamilton concentrated on refining the balance of the car in high lateral load sectors and traction. One of the most delicate adjustments was the height of the rear ground, a parameter that directly influences the aerodynamic balance and braking stability. With surgical precision, Lewis worked with his engineer Riccardo Adami to achieve a midpoint between aggressiveness and control, ideal for the wavy circuit of Zandvoort and the variable climatic conditions that were forecast. That day ended with optimism. Telemetry showed progression, the times were competitive, and most importantly, Hamilton had managed to domesticate a car that initially seemed erratic and nervous. But that feeling of control collapsed the next day, when in the first departure of Saturday, the car behaved as a completely different machine. From the first sector of the free, the British noticed a radical change. The rear train was unstable, unpredictable adhesion, and disconcerting lateral support. At first he thought it was the track, the wind, or even an erroneous reading of the degradation of tires. However, what I felt had no logical explanation based on what they had worked. The car was no longer the same. The bewilderment increased with each lap. The rear of the SF25 seemed to float in long breaks, forcing Hamilton to correct in full support, something completely opposed to his driving style. The traction leaving curve was erratic, and at times it seemed that the car was delivering power in an abrupt way, as if the differential mapping had been altered. The most alarming was not the behavior itself, but the fact that none of those symptoms coincided with the adjustments made the previous day. The harmony built based on hours of simulation and data had disappeared without apparent reason. During the classification, these problems intensified. Although Hamilton managed to save the furniture and qualify in the middle zone of the grille, his frustration was palpable. The car reacted as if it were badly configured, but there was no record that the team on the track had changed anything substantial. And so the race arrived with a Hamilton disconnected from his machine, without the necessary confidence to attack. The light rain that fell in Zandvoort did not help. On Vuelta 23, just when entering Curve 3, an aggressive pair zone where rear support is key, the car was uncontrolled without prior notice. Hamilton did not make a pilot mistake. Simply, the car did not obey. The impact against the barriers was violent, but symbolically even more devastating. What seemed like a weekend of progress became a technical enigma that would require deep investigation. And that was when Frédéric Vasseur, by analyzing telemetry and car data in detail, discovered that Hamilton's SF25 had been deliberately modified between the last session on Friday and Saturday morning. They were not last-moment adjustments or minimum changes. It was a direct intervention that altered the complete behavior of the car without the pilot or his engineer having knowledge. What Hamilton lived on the track was not a bad setting, but a transformation of the vehicle behind him. This discovery would mark the beginning of an internal crisis that still shakes Ferrari's foundations today. And the most worrying, it was still not clear who had ordered that modification. The revelation that Lewis Hamilton's SF25 had been modified without his consent or that of his main engineer caused a true earthquake within Ferrari. Frédéric Vasseur himself, known for his firmness and his aversion to improvisation, soon demanded a complete breakdown of each intervention made on the car from Friday afternoon. What they found in that internal analysis was even more disturbing. The adjustments had not been made by the Hamilton track team, but by personnel assigned to the main performance group, a structure based on Maranello that operates above the career engineers and that, in theory, only intervenes in major strategic decisions for both cars. The problem is that this time, there was no official directive or prior notice, only execution. The findings showed a dangerous hierarchical disconnection. This performance group has the technical capacity and authority to implement changes if they consider it necessary for the good of the team. But what would normally be a coordinated process with the track engineers and approved by the technical directors of the circuit, this time it happened unilaterally. In other words, someone with access to Ferrari's central technical decisions decided to alter Hamilton's car behavior without informing anyone directly involved in their operation. The impact of Zandvoort's incident on Lewis Hamilton goes far beyond a simple lost race. What he lived in the Netherlands left a deep brand, not only in his confidence within the car, but in his perception of the surrounding environment in Ferrari. After a promising preseason, and having shown clear signs of progress on the first 2 dates of the championship, Hamilton arrived in Zandvoort with a legitimate expectation of consolidating himself as an internal leader. His work on track and outside it had approached the engineers, technical staff, and had even generated renewed respect by the mechanics that, until a few months ago, operated under the orders of Charles Leclerc. But after the accident and, above all, after the discovery of the modifications not authorized in his car, something changed. Trust became suspicion. The atmosphere, which until then had been collaborative, became tense, uncomfortable. During the hours after technical analysis, Hamilton was one of the first to receive the preliminary report. His reaction, although publicly contained, was of absolute disbelief. Not only because of the damage that the alterations caused in their performance, but by the violation of a basic principle in the F1. The pilot must have control over his car, and all relevant change must go through him or his engineer. This situation opened a crack in the relationship between the British pilot and the power core in Maranello. Although Ferrari has tried to minimize the matter, stating that it was a bad internal communication, privately the conversations have been much more raw. Hamilton has demanded clear, identifiable, responsible responses and guarantees that such a situation will not be repeated again. His position is not capricious. He knows that to fight for the championship he needs a cohesive, transparent and disciplined environment. You cannot compete on equal terms if you feel that there are sectors within your own team that could compromise your performance. All this leaves Ferrari in an extremely delicate situation. He has one of the best cars on the grill, a driver with a rematch thirst, and an open championship that he can still win. But it also has a fragmented technical structure, cross-interests within the team and a crisis of trust in full construction of the project. If firm, fast and aligned decisions are made, what happened in Zandvoort could only be the first symptom of a season marked by self-destruction. And that is where the true tragedy of this story resides. Because Ferrari has not been defeated by his rivals on the track, but by his own internal contradictions. A team that aspires to return to the peak of motoring cannot afford a culture of hidden decisions, uncomfortable and uncomfortable silences. Or rebuild cohesion from now on, or 2025 will remain as another year in the long list of lost seasons for the most emblematic team of Formula One. What happened in the Netherlands Grand Prix cannot and should not be as a simple technical anecdote in the 2025 season. We are facing an event that crudely bakes inertia of the past. Hamilton's covert SF25 modification not only endangered his performance and integrity as a pilot, but also exposed a governance crisis. Because if the pilot himself cannot trust that the decisions about his car pass through his hands or those of his engineer, then the most important link in the performance chain of a team, that of the confidence between pilot and technical structure, is broken irreversibly. And when that trust breaks, no matter how fast the car is, not even talented, the pilot is. The project is sentenced to instability. Therefore, this incident transcends sports. It becomes a case study on how an elite team can auto-boycott your own season from within. And also raises deeper questions about Ferrari's future as a competitive entity. Can a team win championships if internally it is divided into fiefs that operate with own and without coordination logics? Can Vasseur, a director who has brought order to other structures in the past, to impose a new organizational culture in a historically chaotic environment such as Maranello? And can Hamilton, at this point in his career, allow the luxury of waiting for his team to find stability while the championship escapes? This technical scandal forces us to look beyond the Zandvoort GP. It leads us to reflect on what it really means to build a winning team. It is not just having a competitive car, not even having the right pilot. It is having an ecosystem that works as a symphony. Each element in harmony, every aligned decision, each area committed to the same objective. Now I want to know what you think. Do you think this was an intentional sabotage or a badly managed chain of errors? Should Hamilton demand responsibilities or focus on track performance? And can Vasseur restructure a team that, at times, seems more a struggle of power than a sports unit? Let it know in the comments.